How about that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear us now? Probably not as lovely a sound as what was in our ears, but.
Oh, can I take this off then?
Mm-hmm.
They were ruining my outfit.
before we hit live, Julie was like, I don't think I can wear these headphones because
this is like you can't see my new Brandy Bell earrings. So
all right,
I apologize that we're looking down at our screens in the camera.
You know what?
Can you just move it lower or no?
I can put a thing back there and we can put our computer up there.
Why can't we do it lower?
Fine.
Can't you just lower the whole thing? Fine. There we go. That's way better.
Does that work better for you?
That is way better. Yay. Okay. Okay.
Also, it seems like the audio unit that I had plugged in might have been the cause of slowing down our.
Yeah, that's great. Okay,
setup,
now we're a little bit faster at moving, and it looks
Lisa
like.
K, I can see you, darling.
Yes.
Linda, I can see you. Veronica, Jill.
Yeah, I see everybody's names. Thank you for clicking the link and allowing StreamYard to connect you to us.
Also, do us a favor. Spread the love, because I think our little audio snafu, a lot of people walked away because they couldn't hear anything. So
yeah.
if y'all want to do that whole thing, that would be useful.
Yeah. And we're going to share into our group as well. Just so we decided to go on our public Facebook page here with this one. And with our other chat, we went in our group because we just wanted to have a safe zone. It was the first time we had done something like this, and we just wanted to feel safe and not have contention and have a healthy discussion. And so I feel like this is a topic that, I mean, Christopher and I, we've been talking about it all day, kind of baffled that, I mean, we'll get into this, but that neither of us really knew what Juneteenth was.
And I feel especially like, as a Black man in America myself, if anyone should know about it, I should know about it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until recently that I became aware that Juneteenth was even a thing. And it's astonishing to me, actually, that it's not something that I learned about in school at all. I'm sure that a lot of you probably never heard of it until recently.
Well, I know a lot of you have, because you commented on our post about it and said, how is it that we never, like, I'm glad I admitted and said, I'm right there with you. Like, I'm just being transparent and saying, this is not something that we have celebrated every year. Like, we celebrated a little bit today. We had a barbecue with our little family here, and we just kind of just have spent some time diving into articles and reading posts and watching. What did you watch today over on?
I was looking
learning about it.
I looked at a couple short like featurettes, I guess, about what Juneteenth is, and it's kind of an interesting story. And then also we had a couple of friends who posted made a couple of really good posts that we'll probably read out loud.
Veronica, I love it. So you have been aware of this, and I've seen one of the things, a really good friend of ours, actually, Erica Bailey, I brought her up before. She's a LuLaRoe retailer. She's Black as well, and a good friend of both of ours. And she wrote a beautiful post today that I shared in our VIP group and also on my personal profile. She is, I just am so proud of her, and I've gotten to know her and learn more and more about her through this whole past couple of weeks, as I've watched her step up and take on the almost like a mantle of wanting to educate and bring knowledge and understanding and perspective in a very loving and not forceful and not not negative and not degrading to anybody kind of a way. She's just really that's amazing, Lisa. I love that. Lisa said they have it. Maybe it's more of a Southern tradition then. But I just really admire Erica. She, like, I've shared about her before, but she's a work-at-home mom. She is a full-time LuLaRoe retailer. single mom of 7 kids. She's got a son in college. I think another child possibly. No, I think she's just she homeschools all of her kids. And then her oldest son is away at college. And I love how she takes a topic, she researches, she posts references and links for you to like go further and beyond in your personal study. And so I've been trying to share a lot of her posts because I think they're so informative, and she makes them shareable to be able to help inform people. And just kind of learning her personal history and the things she's gone through in her life. And her dad is a veteran who served in the Vietnam War and came home and had to sit on the back of a bus. And, you know, just the reality of those kinds of things. She's the youngest of 11, all brothers, and all of them have gone on to be, they've gone on to be lawyers, police officers, joined the military, and their dad just taught them to be that's the way that we can help to change. That's how we can change the world and change the viewpoint of people. Is they all chose professions that would help move forward. And I'm seeing Erica here as the youngest little sister, you know, and she didn't necessarily go into the military or into teaching or whatever, but she's a college graduate. She's homeschools her kids, and she's now educating all of us. And I appreciate it and love it. So if you have the chance to read that little post I did, I shared here from Erica about what Juneteenth is. She researched and dug into it. And I think I love how she responds and kind of talks about how, like, these are things not to do. And she doesn't say it in a catty way at all. It's very like, hey guys, like, this is the reality. And I'm going to tell you, I have a mom and dad. I have a dad that would think that would be the right thing to do, is to dress up in like African clothes and have African
like
music
solidarity,
playing.
you know.
I mean, that's just where my dad, you know, in his heart and soul, he thinks he's being supportive. And he really does love learning about cultures and things like that. But I loved that she shared, this is what not to do, and this is what to do. What?
I don't think Carl would do.
Oh, you don't know my dad well enough then. So
okay, I thought, okay.
I don't.
We bonded this
truly
weekend.
Would have. He truly wouldn't. It wouldn't have a single ounce of any sort of anything behind it other than love and wanting to relate and understand.
Yeah.
Like, that's my dad. But,
well, it's the same kind of thing where I've been given what people thought were compliments to me, like, oh, you're so articulate, as a sort of recognizing that I'm Black and that, like, my grades are good, or that you know, I can string a sentence together, you know.
mm-hmm.
And oh, you're so articulate. Well, why wouldn't I be?
Yeah.
I went to the same school your kids went.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I be articulate? Oh, that's right, because I'm Black and you expect me to speak in a certain way, and I don't, you know, and so that's kind of off-putting to some people, I guess. So in the same way that kind of weird, like, what a person would think is a compliment is actually kind of insulting. Erica did a good job of sort of illustrating those kinds of things in her statement, I guess. In
a non-judgmental way,
sure.
From her angle, you know, and saying, you know, just she took the opportunity to educate in that moment and to explain why that is actually disrespectful,
yeah, sure.
You know. So
I actually would like to read the statement. We don't have to do it right this minute, but
I mean, let's poll. Let's ask people what. Oh my gosh, why am I frozen here? That's the worst face to be frozen on. I'm like this.
It's what did you even mean?
What who knew about this? I mean,
yeah,
Lisa said they celebrated it. Veronica is lucky enough to have her best friend be a Black man. I love it. And she got invited to the barbecues. That's awesome. Why did it jump us over here? This is really strange. I'm trying to.
What's happening?
It just put me into a weird place that I don't want to be, because I can't filter. Anyways, I feel like there's obviously a delay going on here. I don't know if it's our little system that we're using. But thank you everybody that's jumping on and joining. And yeah, there's no comments, replies. So
someone just jump on and give us a drop an emoji or something like that so we can see, so we can know that y'all are still here with us, because we have a delay and everything. So we're using a new system, so it's kind of weird. But I don't know. I felt like Erica's statement was pretty poignant and kind of comprehensive. So Julia, before we hit live, Julia was reading to me another statement from another friend who, to me, actually, can you bring that up and I'll read that one first?
Yeah, you can read it.
Because it strikes me, like I was saying, that especially being a Black man, having grown up, I mean, to be fair, I kind of grew up in a school district that was pretty much all white. My sister and I and one other kid were the only Black kids in the school district. So I guess it's not that surprising that we didn't learn about certain things in history, or that history was sort of, not pun unintended, whitewashed, you know.
Yeah.
So
somebody just said that, Kelly.
Did somebody say that?
Because our history books are whitewashed. And
sure.
I mean, it's just, somebody said it like the winners get to write the book.
Sure, history is written by the victors. Yeah. That is for sure. So our good friend Coffee wrote this, and it just kind of gets to the point, and it's just kind of like, yeah, okay. She says this. She said, "It's no accident that you learned about Helen Keller instead of W.E.B. Du Bois. You learned about the Watts and L.A. riots, but not Tulsa or Wilmington. You learned that George Washington's dentures were made from wood rather than the teeth from slaves. You learned about Black ghettos, but not about Black Wall Street. You learned about the New Deal, but not about redlining. You learned about Tommy Smith's fist in the air at the 1968 Olympics, but not that he was sent home the next day and stripped of all his medals. You learn about Black crime, but white criminals were never lumped together and discussed in terms of their race. You learned about states' rights as a cause of the Civil War, but not that slavery was mentioned 80 times in the Articles of Secession. Privilege is having history rewritten so that you don't have to acknowledge uncomfortable facts. Racism is perpetuated by people who refuse to learn or acknowledge this reality. You have a choice. Happy Juneteenth," she says, copy and paste. So yeah, I mean, it is totally the case that there are parts of our history that are sort of glossed over in favor of more palatable things, because it is uncomfortable. It is really uncomfortable and kind of unnerving to acknowledge the sins of our past. And while, you know, Julia and her parents didn't own slaves, there is a legacy. When we talk about white privilege or we talk about systemic racism, those things are legacies of
they're passed on. They're taught.
Sure, absolutely.
They're taught behavior and viewpoint, and I think it's illustrated perfectly. Christopher watched. We talked about last time the video. I mentioned the video of the Italian kids. It's in Italian, but with like English subtitles. English subtitles. And I showed it to Christopher, and he was affected like to tears by that for hours. Like, I'm gonna start crying right now.
I'm already getting missed talking
because it's these children that they're shown two dolls, and if you haven't seen this, maybe I'll post the link for it. Actually I saw it first from Erica. She shared it, and they're these children that are shown two dolls. One's a black doll and one's a white doll, and they are asked a series of questions. Which one is beautiful? Which one is ugly? And the kids, they kind of are looking at the adult, and like they don't want to say the wrong answer, but they then ultimately point to the pretty one is the white one, the ugly one is the black doll, or which is the good one, which is the bad one. That's the American version of it, which apparently is even worse. So I mean, meaning emotional. But in the end, it's basically, I mean, which one is, why is she pretty and why is she ugly? Why is she good? They say good and bad. Like, which one is good? Which one is bad? Which one looks like you? That is the one that hits you in the heart. because then you have these beautiful dark-skinned, they're brown, black, staring at it, looking at, okay, I just said this one is ugly, this one is bad, these are all the reasons why this doll is, all these things, and I'm that. And it's just like stabs you to the heart.
This is it. Or you said this is the miracle one, right?
That's amazing, Hattie. I love that. That's what we are saying, is that I think that I'm seeing a lot of my friends that live in the South that have been taught and learned some of these things, where we both grew up in Southern California or Northern California, and this was not even on my radar. And I mean, in complete transparency, had to say, what is Juneteenth? And I had to dive in and start researching and learn and say, what? And it's amazing.
I don't know how to share the audio of this video, so.
But this is what it looks like. Go the doll, whatever. It's
the doll test.
Anyways, test. That right there shows you that it's learned. Like, this is not inherent necessarily to children. So, that's amazing, Hattie, and I love and appreciate that. I'm so happy to hear that. But it makes me sad for you who didn't have that.
Sure. I mean, I grew up in the Northwest. So I grew up in Northwestern California, right on the coast. And again, like I said, from first to sixth, really from kindergarten through sixth grade, I grew up in essentially a white school district. There was me, my sister, one other black kid, and there was like a couple Hispanics and like one Asian kid. And the history that we were taught was very much glossed over Black history. And all that, I mean, you're gonna get history told, like when the Japanese tell about World War II, I've never been in a Japanese classroom, so I can't own this data, but I would imagine that the way that they tell the story of that history is, different than the way that we would tell it. You know what I mean? Because they were the bad guys, right? And from our perspective, the Japanese were the bad guys because they allied with Germany and attacked us on American soil. You know what I mean? But for the Japanese, they would tell the story. They might have the same facts, but the framing of those facts makes it a totally different conversation. And so for me, growing up in a white school district where we might have been taught some of the same facts, I think it was just framed in a way that, not that they were villainizing blacks in black icons in history, but it was more so their roles in history were just diminished, I think. And there's so much, we barely scratched the surface. There was so much more history that we could have learned that was just never mentioned. We learned about the Underground Railroad. We learned about Rosa Parks. We learned about Martin Luther King Jr. But that's about it. You know what I mean? Like, even I will say that the Black Panthers and Malcolm X were definitely in our history, the way that it was taught, were definitely villainized because some of their policies didn't condemn violence in all of its forms and in certain circumstances. And so they were definitely villainized for that. Sorry, catching up on these. That's why we. Yeah. See, I mean, Hattie, I think you're in a position where overt, explicit racism is very much more a fact of everyday life than it was for most Blacks growing up where I grew up, where a lot of the racism was more implicit. I was just having this conversation earlier today where there's a difference between implicit and explicit racism. Explicit racism is somebody dropping the N-bomb to your face and spitting on you. I just was scrolling through Instagram yesterday or the day before, and this black dude he's a FedEx driver, and he stopped and just went live on Instagram in tears because he's out making deliveries, and is like parked on the side of the road. Some random truck comes skirt around the corner, almost hits him, and then the guy like slams on his brakes, like backs up, calls the guy a nigger, flips him off, and spits on him, and then drives away. And it's like, that's the kind, and this, I can't remember where it was, but it wasn't somewhere that you would expect that sort of thing to happen. It wasn't like it was in Mississippi, you know what I mean? It was like, you know, I don't know where it was. I mean, I guess a lot of the Midwestern states and Southern states have some pretty overt racial issues. But he was in like Washington or something like that, where it's like, oh, you got like Seattle, it's pretty progressive, whatever, blah, blah, blah. No, there are pockets of ignorance everywhere. And it's, like I said, it's more overt in a lot of places, or more, people feel more emboldened or enabled because they're surrounded by people who think that way. And they feel more comfortable saying things where if you were to say the same thing in a place like Portland, Oregon, people would look at you like you're insane, you know? What were you saying, Mom?
I'm gonna run and grab my water.
Run in and grab the water.
You need anything?
I think I have my little skeleton drink over here. So yeah, I was gonna read Erica's statement because she gave us permission to read it. And bear with me, it's a little bit lengthy, but it's, like I said, it's pretty comprehensive and it's well put together, and it was informative for me as well. So I thought I would share that with all of you. And I'll just quote it, and so I'll just read the whole thing through as it is written. She says, "Good morning, super friends. The sun is shining and you've made it to another day. You are blessed. Today is Juneteenth. Juneteenth celebrations originated in Texas on June 19th, 1865. Union General Gordon Granger issued an order declaring the people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free," end quote. This was 2.5 years after President Lincoln decreed the Emancipation Proclamation. That's a mouthful. Try to say that 5 times fast. Which declared enslaved people in rebel states were free, but was only practical to those close to Union territory. But certain states like Missouri and Texas held on well past the Civil War. For a long time, formerly enslaved people did not know they were free. And even after they knew, they faced lynchings, rape, and other continued acts of forced labor. But that didn't stop free people from celebrating the June 19th announcement in opposition to the systems of white oppression. This holiday became known initially as Manumission Day, named after the act of an owner freeing their captives. But later the month June and the number 19 became mixed into what's known now as Juneteenth. Juneteenth celebration died down for several decades. It wasn't because people no longer wanted to celebrate freedom, but it's difficult to celebrate freedom when your life is defined by oppression on all sides. Juneteenth celebrations waned during the era of Jim Crow laws until the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s, when the Poor People's March planned by Martin Luther King Jr. was purposely scheduled to coincide with the date. The march brought Juneteenth back to the forefront, and when march participants took the celebrations back to their home states, the holiday was reborn, and thus starting Juneteenth parades. These celebrations at public parks have historically included parades, the reading of President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and the main event, the food. Indeed, laid out across plates is mostly large amounts of charcoal grilled meats, greens, black-eyed peas, chitlins, and tea cakes, but also an assortment of foods and drinks with red hues. Red velvet cake.
This part I love.
It's interesting, right?
So interesting.
She says red velvet cake, watermelon, where the stereotype comes from, red strawberry soda, and red punch always made appearances. For a long time, relatives told young ones that the red symbolized the blood of the millions of enslaved people who had suffered and died. But the red foods and drinks has a long history that began in Africa, depending on where they were originally taken from. Red in many West African cultures is a symbol of strength, spirituality in life and in death, dating far back to sacred ceremonies. In other areas of Africa, red symbolizes death and mourning and held in high regard to those who have passed. Colors are symbolic and full of intention. Red drinks at Juneteenth celebrations have links to the fruits of 2 native West African plants, the kola nut and hibiscus. The kola nut, typically white or red, was and still is served to guests as a snack to chew, used as a water purifier or steeped for tea. The flowers of the hibiscus, too, were often stewed to make reddish-purple tea called bissap and provided to guests. Both were extracted to the Caribbean and to the Americas during the Atlantic slave trade. From watching their captives, plantation owners noticed that the kola nut could be used as an energy booster, digestive, or cold remedy, and made for a stimulating additive to bitter water. When crushed into a powder, then added into water, the kola nut creates a reddish-brown, refreshing drink. Who knew? I didn't know that. Some historians believe the red color could be connected to the Asante and Yoruba special occasions, which included offering up the sacrifices for cleansing and longevity for their tribe and blessing for their women as a gateway to the future. The Asante, Yoruba, and Congo people were the main tribes brought to Texas in the 19th century. I guess that's why it makes sense. The food is not the only symbolism built into the celebration. The Juneteenth flag designer, L.J. Graff, packed lots of meaning into her design. The colors red, white, and blue echo the American flag to symbolize that the enslaved people and their descendants were truly Americans, although seen as beneath the rest. The star in the middle pays homage to Texas, while the bursting new star on the horizon of the red and blue fields represents a new freedom and a new people and the possibility of equality. The question I've received most about this day is, how can I, as a white person, celebrate? What do you? Oh, the flag.
The flag.
Easy, she says. Rejoice, reflect, and educate. That's truly what the 4th is supposed to be.
The 4th?
Yeah, that's truly what the 4th is supposed to be as well. Except in 1776, most of those that populated the U.S. were enslaved. Remember, we've already gone over the 3/5 rule. So she wrote this talking to her audience, and she's already given some additional sort of statements and lessons. And so she was talking about the 3/5 rule. So if you use the census to account for the balance of blacks versus whites from back in the day, black slaves outnumbered their white counterparts in a lot of areas. But because the census only allowed for blacks to be considered 3/5 of a person, the census numbers were skewed in that way. That was the point she was making. She said, if you count all the slaves that didn't count, you'll find that slaves outnumber whites. This doesn't even count the indigenous people that were the original inhabitants of this land. Yeah, of course. So this holiday is not just a black holiday. It's a celebration that brought us one step closer to today. And that deserves celebration. So read to your kids and teach them why this day matters. If you don't know, dive deeper in and educate yourself. Do a cookout and enjoy laughter with family when it's safe to do so. Play some music and have a great time. Here's some things she says not to do. Don't feel the need to dress a certain way. Please don't put on kente cloth or African clothing because you think that shows solidarity. It does not. I have not gone over cultural appropriation, but let's just say to be yourself and respect others. You can wear a Juneteenth graphic shirt or not, but it's not needed. Let's not start a trend that makes this holiday lose its meaning as so many other holidays have. Also, please just listen to your normal music. Don't put on ethnic music or African drums. Truly just be yourself. This last one is harder on what not to do. You don't need to apologize to every black person for what happened. I'm not sure how many. I'm sorry it took longer messages I've received just because your calendar now. Okay, she's just saying now that your calendar says Juneteenth on it. I'm sorry. Anyway, it's silly. Today is about education, celebration, and inner reflection. Let's do that together. Educate the truth about history, which means exposing the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Celebrate how far we've come while being respectful that we're still not where we need to be. Inner reflection to see how you are going to make a difference to ensure progress continues and succeeds. The second question that I get is, why do you need another holiday? You already have Martin Luther King Day and an entire month dedicated to you. Why do you need more? Well, I think the simple fact that this question is even asked should be enough to show how far we truly have to go, because you seem to need proof of my race's worth in comparison to yours. Let me just say that we in America celebrate so many holidays that have nothing to do with us for the sake of immoral activities or drinking. St. Patrick's Day, Mardi Gras, Cinco de Mayo, Oktoberfest, to name a few. I'll also point out that in certain states, Robert E. Lee's birthday is a holiday, and Confederate heroes have a holiday. And these people fought against the United States. But the final freedom of those who built this country on free, brutal, murderous labor should be ignored because it makes you uncomfortable. At every Juneteenth festival, the Emancipation Proclamation is read right after the flags are raised to begin the ceremonies. But today, we'll read the General Order Number 3, as read by General Granger. It said, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the executive and United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves." Just lost my place here. "And the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect a military post and that they will not be supported in idleness either here or elsewhere," end quote. So she says, yeah, you heard that right. You're free, but go ahead and stay put and work for your new employer for the wages that he decides. That conversation is for tomorrow, my friends, because today we celebrate. Okay. Find a way to spread joy and love today. Reflect on your life and how you can make an impact for forward momentum and change. Educate in love and grace, and sometimes only plant seeds that will bear fruit later. Be the good that you want to see in the world. Peace and light, my loves. I pray you see the joy in learning and growing, even when it's uncomfortable to do so. Yeah, that's the end of it. So sorry, that was rather lengthy, but it made a lot of really good points. Sorry.
No, I just appreciate that. I feel like I've if you have dove in at all and said, what is Juneteenth? And you Googled it and you started researching, you found out that it was the day that the last slaves were informed that they were actually free, and it was about 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah,
right?
So there were a couple states. Texas was one of them, and Texas was where this initially originated, and it was because slaves had been freed in what 1863, I believe, and Juneteenth was June 19th, 1865, and it was because it took about 2.5 years for word to be given to the slaves in those southern states that they had actually been freed. So the slave owners, knowing that their slaves were technically free, kept it on the hush hush, kept it on the down low, so they continue to exploit these people.
Also, when I don't know if she made this point or if this is from somewhere else in my reading today, but Texas and Missouri were territories still. They were not
technically states.
Not technically states, and so they sort of just kind of scooted around the Emancipation Proclamation, and so that's kind of why the official declaration was needed to be made.
Right.
2.5 years later, which is yeah.
It's absurd.
Yeah. So.
What are you gonna do?
But obviously we live in a different day and age where we are connected virtually. Like they obviously didn't have. I mean, maybe word of mouth,
sure,
around the country. But I'm sure so many people that just had no idea that they had been like issued freedom, and then.
Sure, and I was also listening to a story earlier today about it was basically it was from. Like an excerpt from a statement from a slave from back in the day, who basically she was like, yeah, I'm free, but I'm still getting whipped. I'm still getting raped by my employer. I can't leave. I'm not really free to go. And so even when the word of freedom swept across the country, finally, it still took even more time for the actions of people to catch up to that proclamation.
Well, I think what it comes down to is what we are experiencing today is started then. And here, how many hundreds of years later are we still working through, like hashing through, truly allowing people to be free, you know, and allowing them to be free of stereotypes, free of bondage in so many ways.
Sure, and it's I mean, today obviously is Juneteenth, and it's you know, a celebration of the freedom of the end of slavery in this country.
Liberation Day or Federation Day. That's what besides Juneteenth.
Oh sure.
Juneteenth is
it's been called like four or five, six different names. And I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was going to say, so today obviously is about the end of slavery and that proclamation, but like our friend Erica said, also think of it as a celebration of just humanity and how far we've come, with a recognition of how far we have yet to come. Because it's funny, like with every, I'll use the example of like immigrants coming to this country. With every successive group of immigrants that showed up, different ethnicities, different nationalities that showed up to this country, the people who showed up, the immigrants who showed up before them, like the generation before, treated them in a lot of cases the same way that they had been treated when they first showed up. And so there's always like a scapegoat somewhere, you know, whether it's blacks or members of the LGBTQ community, or, you know, members of a religious group or a non-religious group or whatever. Anyone who's the other can be sort of categorized and treated as a scapegoat and slap labels on them to have all kinds of baggage or what have you. And so I think today, more than just the celebration of the proclamation of the freedom of slavery, the freedom of slaves, is about the fundamental equality of humanity across the board. And so with that in mind, that's kind of what I've been thinking about today, is just how can we adopt a mindset of equality that just isn't just about race and ethnicity, but is also about, you know, at a even more fundamental level, is like men, women, folks who don't identify with a you know, with a traditional gender, like we're all humans. We're all in the same boat here. Or rather than a boat, we're all on this flying marble in space. You know what I mean? We have to share space with each other.
I love him.
And
play sci-fi guy here.
Well, it's science. It's science reality though.
What did you say? This
flying marble in space.
In space.
That's where we are. We're all in it together. Well, humans and animals too.
Yes.
Fulani. Yeah, animals get a fair shake too. Well, I mean, the humans are animals too. So, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Especially this one.
Hey.
Hey. Anyway, what else did you want to talk about today?
I don't know. I really enjoyed our last discussion Q&A, and I just thought, I mean, I'm appreciating perspective. I'm like, Hattie, I appreciate you sharing with us, because that's education to me, to understand and learn. Like, that makes me happy to know that you did. I mean, because I was shocked when I brought it up to Christopher, and he's like, "What? I don't know what June 16th or Juneteenth is." And I was like, "Okay, so this isn't something that I should know about." Well, it is, but it's like wasn't something that I just like zoned out in school on, right?
No, it's definitely not something that you skipped. It's something that you know
that was
skipped over on your behalf.
Probably, yes, yeah.
Which is crazy, because it's like Erica made in her statement. It's like we have state holidays that celebrate the men who were in fact the traitors to this country. The Confederate soldiers waged war against America. They waged war against you and me. They waged war against freedom and the fundamental equality of humanity. And it's crazy to me that those people are still celebrated. When you see somebody who's like waving a Confederate flag, or they got the sticker on their truck, it's like either you don't understand what it is that you're that represents, or you know and you agree that those people and that symbolism should be celebrated. Or maybe it's a combination of both. I don't know. Some people, I don't know. It's just crazy to me. Like anytime I go home to Eureka, California, which, you know, like I said, there weren't that many Black people. But it wasn't until I left. I went to Japan, the summers between my junior and senior years of high school, and I was there for 4 months. And it wasn't until I came back and I landed at the airport, drove back from San Francisco northward to Eureka, and once we crossed like the county line, I started counting Confederate flags, how many I saw from the time we entered the county to the time I got home to my house, and it was like 30, and I was just astonished because I'd never noticed before, and I think it was just because I was so acclimated to that. And it was shocking to learning what that stands for, that symbolism stands for, and how many people were flying that flag, and not just at home, not just in the privacy and the comfort of their own home, in their own social circle of people who maybe believe the same way, but they felt emboldened enough to post it on their truck or to like put it on their lunchbox or whatever, you know, and they got a tattoo of it, you know, and it was just shocking to me. I guess it wasn't that shocking because I'd experienced really overt racism growing up all in school, being called a nigger straight to my face and nobody doing anything about it, you know. It was shocking, but at the same time, it was kind of like,
this is a dad moment, you guys. He has
did I miss a
blue putty.
Oh gosh.
He has blue putty stuck to his.
Oh man.
Sorry, I didn't mean to dig you out, but I did.
Anyway,
I looked down and saw.
Long story long. I mean, it's
still the state flag in Mississippi.
Yeah, it's crazy. And in fact, we've driven by. I think I can't remember what state it was in. We drove by. There was a time when we were on our pop-up tour. And we drove back and forth a couple times because we hit this, like, did a couple circles around a couple states.
Yes.
And we would drive by. It might have been like Virginia, North Carolina, or something like that. But we drove by, and it's like you enter the state, and it's like, "Welcome to Virginia." And then like a mile down the road is a Confederate flag at like full mast, just flapping in the wind, right, like above the American flag. It's like, what? Really? And now there's a lot of talk about removing Confederate flags.
Yeah, Veronica said, I think people who fly the Confederate
flag, they call it the rebel flag.
Know full well what it represents.
I mean, you got to at this point. I mean, now it's like we were talking the other day, and we might have mentioned on our previous discussion, like, I can forgive a lot, but I'm kind of getting sick and tired of the excuse that, oh, they're just a different generation. They don't know what it means, or they don't know, like, we live in the information age now. You can catch up. Feel free to catch up to the rest of the world. Get, like, if you can't be bothered to read the full article, get the Cliff Notes, damn it. Like, catch up.
Sarcasm, anybody? Mr. Christopher. Well, thank you guys for being here and hanging out with us. I mean, not that we're wrapping it up or anything, but what do we want to talk about? What's anything else intriguing that you learned today through travel? I mean, through studying and researching.
Well, I mean, Juneteenth is really a fascinating holiday to me. I think in the future, I definitely want to make more efforts to celebrate it in the same way that we celebrate holidays like 4th of July.
Well, I love it. I've seen quite a few. I was telling Christopher, I got an email from Walgreens today, talking about how they intend to honor this Juneteenth, and also what they're doing about it, and that they are focusing on and investing in some of their stores that were hit hard in specific areas that were targeted. And I was like, Walgreens, you know, so I'm loving hearing more and more from people about their, how their places of business are giving them paid vacation or paid day holiday pay off.
That's great.
And then isn't Virginia declared it a holiday?
I mean, if we can still celebrate Columbus Day as a federal holiday, for heaven's sake, learn that history, because that's a doozy. Then I think Juneteenth or Liberation Day, whatever you would like to call it, definitely has place in the calendar of celebrations to be made a bigger deal than it is.
Ralph Ellison, author of Invisible Man, wrote a novel called Juneteenth.
I'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
So in other news, what's been going on with you?
Well, this feels like a little bit of the beginnings of of your podcast.
My podcast?
Yeah.
Our podcast.
Oh, okay. Not yours?
What's yours is mine.
Okay.
That statement, or the saying, what's yours is mine, what's mine is ours. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Seems a little weird to me. Seems a little one-sided. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is also mine, but you can have a little bit of it too.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll take it.
Such a weird phrase. Barb says, I work closely with a lady that calls black children buckwheat. Wow, and other negative references to black culture. I repeatedly tell her not to use these terms to my children, and her reply is, they know I'm kidding. No, they don't. They're 5 to 12 years old. I've reported her because others don't hear this from her, and I think she's so kind-hearted. It's hard to hear her speaking to kids like that. I know they're only not my biological siblings. Yeah, that's insane. Like, that's crazy. Especially when you've asked her to her face, please don't call my kids that. Even if they don't know, even if they have no idea and it goes completely over their heads, how degrading is that? How, like, you clearly have some issues on the inside that you need to deal with. Because, bitch, that's mean. Like, what's wrong with you?
Wow. Veronica just said that her ex-husband was a card-carrying member of the KKK.
Damn, and
multi-generational.
What the hell? That's why did he want to marry you if he was a racist? I presume he wasn't a native. Like, I don't understand that.
Yeah. Well, multi-generational, if it was like a sort of passed down thing. Maybe.
I guess, but like that'd be like if that's so crazy to me, because it's like, okay, the mental gymnastics that are necessary for a person to hold such divergent like beliefs in their head at the same time is like something is and isn't something at the same time. Wow. That's crazy. It's like, so I can be a total like card-carrying member of the KKK, a known racist organization. That's the whole point of it. But as a white guy, and I'm married to a member of the First Nations people. Like, what? And you like, that's mind-boggling. Treated me horrible and I didn't know. Oh well. I'm still like confused as to like what his motivations were. That's mind-boggling to me. But sorry, I wanted to just comment again with Barb. So if this woman continues that behavior, and nobody, like your peers, can't either don't have your back or aren't in a position to like help you out, like. Forgive me for saying, but that shit is nuts. Like there's got to be somebody that someone whose head you can go over.
Well,
like that's crazy to me.
Oh my gosh, I think that as we are progressing as a culture and a society, not culture, society as a community.
He said, as long as you ain't black. Wow.
As we're progressing forward and becoming more and more educated and stepping out of our I want to use the word naivety
Mm-hmm.
and misinformation. I feel like the tolerance for that kind of talk will, because it's not just you, Barb, like, and I mean, don't watch the video about the kids, because it might break your heart.
It broke my heart.
Yeah. Okay.
Barb, I will say, if this has been going on for 3 years and you filed a formal complaint and nothing's been done, you have grounds for a lawsuit. You should, and I would seriously consider filing one, because that's inexcusable. And if the people who are in charge are unwilling to do anything about it, to take steps, and you're working with kids, F that S. No. File a lawsuit and then you can retire.
Oh man.
And give me a cut. Saying good nothing.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh,
we've
Hattie, for sure.
We've actually been diving into, or maybe me more than Christopher, but I'm really intrigued by Christopher's family history. And he has Aunt Tina, who sometimes jumps on and hangs out with us. Her and one of her sons have done and researched a lot of the family history. And I'm so intrigued to, as we learn the stories about Christopher's family that were slaves in Louisiana, right? That's where Mississippi and Louisiana. And when we were in Eureka for Christmas or New Year's, we sat with his grandma Wanda, and she actually called his biological grandfather, maternal biological grandfather, Tom, who, have you met him before?
I know him. I mean, I've met him. I don't really know him.
Yeah, Deborah, there you go. Turn the recorder on, and yes, because that's uncalled for. But just family history is something that I've always, you guys know, I come from this giant family, and it's always something that we have been taught, learning about our ancestors and where we come from and their stories of struggle and triumph. And I feel like for me, knowing those things and learning about my ancestors and the things that they could get through has been found like a huge foundation for me. It's been, for me, going through any trial in my life, to be able to know, like, you're standing on the shoulder of people that have gone through similar or their own trials and struggles, and they made it through the storm, or they just persevered, And so that's always been something that I love history. And so I remember growing up, every time we went to a family reunion, we would sit, it was before tablets and all the things, we would sit in the car, and my mom had family history books, and she would read us stories of my grandmas and grandpas. Some of her ancestors come from Scandinavia and Denmark, and the stories of how there were two sisters that were basically slaves, that mom couldn't take care of them and sent them to go work on a farm. And these big guys with these big, what are they called? Those long scythes to cut the grain, would play games and see how close they could get to the girls. And one guy got close enough to slice her stomach open, and she died in the arms of my great grandma. Her little sister. She watched her little sister die, bleeding to death. And so just kind of, and then that great grandmother of mine then was able to, she experienced something that horrible, and then made her way to America. She knew that she needed to get out of the situation she was in, and was able to come to the US with her older brother. And so just kind of learning and knowing those kinds of stories, it makes me want to dive in and learn more about Christopher's family. And so every time we go to Eureka, I want to just sit down with either Grandma Wanda or Aunt Tina, or when we drive cross country next time, we are going to stop and visit Aunt Bertie in Louisiana, and just sit and learn from her. So I recently put my Facebook like on my personal Facebook, that family picture when we were all together. Was it last summer with and when Aunt Birdie was in town from Louisiana with Kathy and everybody, and it was really, I mean, I just, that picture, that popped up on my phone recently, and I was like, you know what, that just is like, that was a time of joy, and I loved getting to know those family members and talking and sitting and learning, and I think it's important for me to share those stories with Atlas, because like I said, I grew up being taught and told stories of my ancestors, and I think that as we've kind of dove in and learned some of the stories and seen the pictures, it's amazing. There's one uncle that looks just like his sister Crystal's little boy Alvin.
Yeah. Oh, it's eerie.
Squirrel, and he's a mixed, like you can tell he's got a blonde afro, and he's this tall, slim guy, like hanging out with cousins or brothers or whatever. And as you dive in and learn the story, his dad was the master, you know, his mom was one of the slaves, and it's just, you know, and actually the Landry last name came through him from that master. That's how Christopher has the last name Landry. And so just learning that history and like understanding that, it's kind of like, what? Whoa. So anyways.
Man, Barb, I want to have a conversation with this woman. You know what? In fact, I had a conversation with some folks at where were we? Was it when we were in Omaha maybe? And I went to get pizza. We ordered pizza. Remember that?
Wait, where?
No, we were at a hotel. We weren't in Omaha. We were somewhere.
Iowa. We were in Iowa because we were right at the border of Illinois, and Illinois had completely shut down already, that's right. And Iowa hadn't. We were literally like, we stopped in the last city in Iowa before going into Illinois.
But stuff was shut down enough where you couldn't go and just like sit down in the. Oh, hello, Ricky, darling. Ricky and I went to elementary school together. What was I saying?
About the pizza place.
Oh, so just having a conversation with this lady, and I overheard them talking politics and whatever, you know, and you know, I'm a politics junkie. So just started having a conversation, butted in on the conversation, I guess. They were right there. They invited me in. And it was just, it's like the same thing that Veronica that you were talking about, and how your ex-husband has to have some like just mental, like, what's the word? What's the word that I'm trying to think of? When you have two completely different opposing ideas that you hold in your mind at the same time as both as true, when they're like mutually exclusive. Dang it, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, having a conversation with this lady in there, in the mental like gymnastics that she had to do to like hold and stay true to the position. And in that context, it was politics, but it's very definitely steeped in the systemic racism conversation that's happening right now. And I said, forget about Trump, forget about Bernie Sanders, forget about the politicians themselves. Let's talk about the policies, and walk through the policies one by one. And I think the one that we settled on was healthcare. And she said, I don't want to pay for anyone else's healthcare. So I don't want like universal single payer healthcare or whatever. And when we broke it down, it was basically rooted in spite. It was when you walk them through and figure out, okay, well, this policy is more fiscally responsible, or it's like costs less money for everybody and have better outcomes and blah, 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 blah. I don't like it because I don't want to pay for someone else. It's like, wow, the lack of like solidarity with your fellow humans that we have, because we surround ourselves with people who we get in like our own like media bubbles, where we only consume certain media that agrees with the positions that we already have. So we have that cognitive, or we have that confirmation bias. And I'm guilty of it too. I constantly have to check myself with any position that I take, or if I'm watching one type of media, some progressive media all the time, I need to balance it out by watching some conservative media so that I can have a clear picture of this sort of sliding scale, the spectrum of views that people have. And I want to be educated on what the person who's on the opposite side of the argument believes. But I also want to have a clear picture of what they believe, not some twisted, misinformed version that I've made up in my own head that I think that they hold, And I don't know, it just, sorry, long bunny trail. I have a question. Why do you think Trump is having a rally in Tulsa of all places and at this time? I mean, it's tough to say. Who can really say what truly is motivating a person to do what they do if you're not inside their head? I think some of his past behaviors have shown that he, at best, doesn't care about issues facing certain demographics of people in this country. I think a lot of people consider him to be a racist. And I think co-opting an important date with something as frivolous as a rally is his way of sort of stripping the power from it. I mean, it's the similar thing with like all the protests that are happening, where you have a few people who are coming in from out of state. Like we have these Black Lives Matter protests happening, and everyone's marching peacefully. And then you got a couple of like white people who show up from out of state, tagging, breaking windows, burning cars, doing all kinds of crazy stuff to try and incite violence or whatever. And it's a way of hijacking that event to strip it of its meaning or to make it about something else. And I think that's probably what was happening, is intentionally scheduling some rally on an important date to distract from what that date is really about. And I think it blew up in his face in some regards. I think the people that support him for the perceived racism that he holds are like, yeah, stick it to him. And there's also another little thing about, there was an ad that he did that had like an official campaign ad that had all this Nazi symbolism and stuff in it, an inverted red triangle, certain numbers that are associated with like Heil Hitler, and just all this crazy stuff. And I think the whole controversy is that Facebook took it down because of all the, like, if you're not educated in that arena and like you don't know what all that symbolism means, it goes over most people's heads. But for the people who are like in that camp and like love that, are like, yeah, get them, And so enough people recognize what that symbolism means that they were like, we can't allow this kind of overt like hatred. Like the thing with like social media, like Facebook, is that they're a private platform, so they can choose what content they want to show. If they're too aggressive with curating content like that, taking down things that they just don't agree with and impeding on people's free speech, even if it's hate speech, while that's within their right, they sort of ostracize certain pockets of people who use their platform. So if they're going to say, well, we're going to take something down because we don't agree with it, whether politically or whatever, again, that's their right to do as a private entity, but it does have some backlash if you're doing that too much. But I think for some, and I have been known to say to people, like, you have free speech rights. Even if the speech that you're spouting is hateful, you have the right to say it. That's why our military service people die protecting those freedoms, so that you can have your beliefs. Even if we disagree with what your beliefs are, you still have the right to talk about them. You still have the right to express your beliefs freely. I still stand by that. But for the most powerful person on the planet to be spouting hate speech or acting in a way that bolsters that group of people who are filled with hate and emboldening those people, in some ways it's like, in some ways I'm fine with it, only because I would rather that a person who is a racist, for example, I would rather know what's on their mind. I would rather that they're upfront and straightforward with how they feel, rather than having to tiptoe around it and not know if, if I know that the owner of this company is racist, I'm not going to go apply for a job there. But if I go and apply for a job and I get denied because I'm black, or because someone has a black sounding name on their resume or whatever, I would rather know that that person was racist, rather than having to play this like game of cowardly hide and seek. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, I actually appreciate the saying the quiet parts out loud. You know what I mean? Saying the ugly things unabashedly, because at least we know where you stand. So I don't know. You have thoughts on that? No.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw that deep down in yeah, I don't know. And again, who's to say what's on a person's heart? You can only really judge a person by the things that they do and the things that they say. And I mean, yep. we all see the same things. It's just like I was saying earlier. You can look at this. You can look at the same facts from multiple angles, and depending on the angle that you're looking at a fact from, the way that you frame that conversation can drastically change the outcomes of that conversation. I
just found doodles for my little guy.
Oh gosh, he's an artist.
Sorry.
Old Atlas.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a long rant.
Yeah. Yeah. We just turned really political, so.
Sorry, I'll save it for the YouTube channel,
yes.
For the podcast,
yeah,
instead of our Facebook
I know,
page.
it's fine. I mean, we can talk. Yeah. Happy Juneteenth.
Hey, happy Juneteenth.
Friends.
I mean, yeah, for those of you who are like in our circle, like you guys are in our community, you're here for a reason. We love you. We, again, might disagree on politics and religion and all those the sensitive topics, but we still love you. I mean, obviously you wouldn't be here if you didn't know that, and I think not to toot our own horn, but I think we do a pretty good job about remaining inclusive and,
I think that, yeah.
It's just, I'm the kind of person who kind of wears the heart on the sleeve, and I think we're living in a time where there's too much at stake to censor ourselves for the sake of politeness. We were talking about having to get uncomfortable to make progress, and I
mm-hmm.
believe that 100%. No great strides of history have been made by people who were too afraid to do anything, or they were afraid to do something and they did it anyway. And that's when progress happens, is when you feel you might have that fear, but the only way that courage can emerge is in the presence of fear. And so to say what's on your mind, what's on your heart, unabashedly, just like those people who are waving their Confederate flags, they believe something, they're not afraid to say it out loud. Even if we think it's ugly, they're not afraid to say it. So why should we be afraid to say what's on our minds and what's on our hearts? And to why should we be afraid to denounce the evil that we perceive in the world? Why should we be afraid to denounce the hatred that we see and that we experience in the world, mm-hmm. when the people who are filled with hatred have no problem saying the quiet parts out loud anymore? Why should we? Because if we don't say those parts out loud, then our voices are going to be drowned out, and I feel like there's going to be a point of no return when we're going to get to a precipice of people over here on this side are full-throatedly screaming what they believe, and we think it's terrible and we don't say anything. We'll prepare to get steamrolled, because if there's an old
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm so easily derailed from my train of thought that
there's an old what?
I was just saying there's an old saying that's something about it. It's like when they came and knocked on the doors of my neighbor, and to march them off to the camps or to the gas chambers or whatever, and you didn't say anything because it wasn't I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place. And then when I saw these people over here being persecuted, I didn't say anything because it wasn't my place. And then when they came knocking on my door to march me, nobody said anything because there was nobody left to say anything. So if we're silent too long, because it doesn't affect us personally, so we don't jump in the fight, we don't express what our opinions are, we don't fight for the cause, then when those guns are turned on you, don't expect anybody else to say anything because there won't be anybody else.
Well, it's like that quote again that Martin Luther said, in the end, you'll remember the silence of your friends more than the anger and hate from your enemies.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, Hattie, the new word is uncomfortable. And that is truly, like, I think that having my mom and dad here this past week and a half, through all of this, like through this time period where we're just, there's a lot of uncomfortable conversations that were had.
Hey, Sarah.
And not contentious at all, just very inquisitive and informative, and helping really truly helping my parents to see all sides, and not that they are like adamantly one-sided. I feel like when I'm sharing, I don't know if were our headphones on when we were talking about my dad dressing in.
Oh gosh.
So my dad has a giant heart, and he just truly loves people. He loves cultures and learning and reading about different communities. And my dad has Native American in him, Cherokee, and I remember as a kid growing up that he learned and researched all about Inipi tents or Inipi ceremonies, and he built a tent in our backyard where you did it was almost cleansing, where you have hot rocks in the middle and then you pour water on it and makes the steamer. Sweat lodge, exactly. And it wasn't out of any reason other than he just, part of him longs and craves to discover cultures and communities. And with every single one of my brother-in-laws that has come into the family that's Samoan or Tongan, he has dove headfirst into the culture and learned about it. And he wants to wear the lava-lavas, and he wants to learn the different, do the different dances and things like that, because he truly wants to be a part of it. And that's what I mean when I say my dad, had they been here, he would be like, okay, what do we do? Do we need to wear something special? Or, he wants to be embracive, and doesn't quite understand that there is maybe a boundary or
you just made up a word that I kind of like, embracive.
Oh,
it's like embracing and abrasive.
Embracive is not a word.
Embracive. It seems to describe what Erica was talking about in her post. It's like, these are the things not to do.
Yes.
When well-intentioned people say dumb things. That's what I'm saying,
is my dad is a well-intentioned person. His heart is giant and is well-meaning, but he does. So it was kind of our privilege and opportunity to help educate a little bit, to understand why that might not be interpreted as him being supportive and
Sure. Well, even Lene uttered the words. She referenced Asians as yellow.
I know. Well, Lisa, I appreciate that article. Lisa shared an amazing article, but literally sharing that with my mom, she had no idea.
So the question the question for me is because I'm tired. I'm tired of letting people off the hook because they're from another generation.
Yeah.
Because there were people in your generation with the same age mid 70s that don't think that way, that never would say something like that, that would never would have been afraid for their child to marry a black man. You know what I mean? That grew up in similar circumstances as you. So what makes, where's the difference there? And what can we do to reach people like that instead of just rolling our eyes and dismissing them as, oh, they're just from another time?
I'll tell you, my mom, as we sat and read that article that Lisa shared with us together, she truly said, thank you for teaching me. Thank you for explaining this to me and to understand, because it was just what was said at the time in the place that she grew up. And she, I mean, to take pause and to think through it, and I'll be transparent and say, not that I've said that, but I'm sure there are things that I have said in a way that have been just because it's the way that I heard something, and I had no idea what the meaning was or the understanding was until I actually took the time to learn and educate myself. So,
a lot of
and Lisa, we talked about this,
you were talking about jerry-rigged or something.
Jerry-rigged, what? I won't say it, but what's the actual origin of jerry-rigged? You went and researched, or there are so many different connotations, implying. I mean, it could be whether you're Asian or, in that article, I think it talks about Chinaman and using that as a derogatory term, or derogatory phrases used about Jewish people, or just so many different cultural, Latin Americans, Mexican, just that.
I remember when I was a kid,
roll off some people, and they have no idea what it actually means or where it originated, or gosh, there's one. There's one phrase that is so common, or no, and it's similar to these nursery rhymes. Think about Ring Around the Rosie. Do you know what that is about?
How dark that is.
How dark, and and this is this happy little ring around the rosy that we sing with kids. And when you think of the words, they're actually exactly. What? And so in the same kind of way, there are phrases and things that we use that are super derogatory, or have like
Indian giver.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So
catch up. That's all I gotta say.
No, Lisa, and I appreciate you 100% for sharing that with me, because it was an opportunity for me to, because in that moment, my mom said it on a live, and I was like, and I knew it was very naive of her, it wasn't, she didn't say it intentionally to be offensive, because she just had no idea. And so when I saw that you messaged, I was happy to see that you are educating me and you're taking the opportunity to share with us. And so I appreciate you. Just know that I really appreciate that, because that truly opened up a whole conversation, not just about that, but about a lot more with my mom to help further that.
And I feel like Lene and Carl, like you said, Carl is a very curious person about cultures and history and those sorts of things. It's important. I mean, a person's never going to learn if they're not interested in learning, right? If they're ignorant about a thing, and they're too lazy to be interested in educating themselves on it, you're never going to reach somebody like that. But I think most people aren't like that. Most people are kind of lazy when it comes to researching and learning about something new, especially something that makes them feel uncomfortable, or something that they've been told their whole lives from their own circle either doesn't exist, or it's not a big deal, or whatever. It can be hard to unlearn those things to then, like I was saying, reframe the conversation around facts that tells a different story than what you were used to, or what you might have expected. And I that's one thing that I appreciate about Lene, is that while she has a vast level of naivety, she's also, when she learns something, she's embarrassed.
She's teachable.
You know, she's embarrassed that she said that on a live stream. Not just because it was a live stream, but because she was ignorant of the fact that that was a derogatory thing to say. It's not like she was rejoicing in that, you know what I mean, or intentionally being, being racist. And I think that the vast majority of people are similar in that they don't want to be ignorant. Nobody wants to be ignorant. It's just like when I was a kid, I wanted to know how to play the piano. I didn't want to learn how to play the piano. I just wanted to know. Mm-hmm. And I was a little bit lazy. And so in learning, like, it took me a lot longer than it would have had I just jumped in and embraced the work and embraced the journey and just do it. Instead, I was resistant. And so it took me a lot longer to figure it out.
And now he plays the piano beautifully, and we need to have a sunroom serenade.
Okay.
The piano right back there. Lisa, yes, please do share. I'd love to see that for sure. And Lori, hello. Yes.
Lisa, that'd be awesome.
And you're like just so close. So close yet so far.
Who's that?
Lori.
Oh, Lori.
Yes.
Girl, get over here. What you doing?
Lane, thank you, hon. So hi, Michaela.
So I was gonna say, I feel like taking all that into mind, the question is, how do we teach people like that? How do we reach the people sort of en masse who are ignorant but want to learn, or who are willing to learn? And there's a lot, like right now, there's this sort of reawakening of people who either were just turned, like, I don't want to say turned off to it, but just it wasn't a present thing in their minds until the marches started happening, until the backlash started happening from.
It just started opening up the Pandora's box, sort of, in a good way. Like
I truly think that we've reached a tipping point. Like, we've reached a point of no return.
There's no way. You know what I mean? Like, this is not gonna, like, no. The changes are already starting to happen, and I think that's the point of pushing forward and being, like Veronica said, that we're crucial to the movement. Like we all of us are educating ourselves, and I think that graphic that I shared about becoming anti-racist, or how to, like, the journey of acknowledging, or I can't remember what it's actually called, but I posted it in the VIP group. Maybe I'll post it again. But when you get through the fear phase, where you don't want to, you're scared to say anything. When you get past that, then you're in the learning phase, and you are open to learn. And I feel like we've cracked past that fear point for so many people, and we're into this phase of learning. And the next phase beyond that is the doing phase, and it's what are you going to do about it? And then that graph that we posted, or the graphic, tells you all the things to do. Like what like, you have to get your voice out there in a way that is heard by the people that are making the changes. And so awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Here, I'm going to look for that really quickly, and then we can read what some of it says. I posted that in our VIP group, I think. Because I just think, as I was reading through that, I really
conservative and racist area, lots of red flags, Fox. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, oh, Veronica, I can't tell you how many people I've heard in instances of, anecdotal stories that people have told me of, like, there's like the Boogaloo Boys who are, like, trying to incite a civil war, a second civil war. And I mean, it might be possible, quite frankly, and depending on who's in leadership at the time, it could go either way, I hope that there are enough sensible people in, checks in our system of government that if an order were given to, fire live ammunition into a crowd of peaceful protesters, that those people who have the guns in their hands would have the sense not to pull the trigger. Enough people have accepted and acknowledged ignorance and are doing something about it that people who are afraid to admit or acknowledge their ignorance are feeling like it's less scary to move forward. Yeah.
This is the becoming anti-racist. So the first zone is the fear zone. You deny racism is a problem. You avoid hard questions. I strive to be comfortable, and that's Hattie said that word uncomfortable is key. I am vulnerable, I strive to be comfortable. I talk to others who look and think like me. So like we said, I feel like we've been living in that place way too long. So the next phase is where I feel like we're at, and we're rapidly going to the even further phase. So the next phase is learning zone. I recognize racism is a present and current problem. I seek out questions that make me uncomfortable. I understand my own privilege in ignoring racism. I educate myself about race and structural racism. I am vulnerable about my own biases and knowledge gaps. I listen to others who think and look differently than me. So I feel like we are completely we've cracked into that full-fledged, just having some of the conversations with my parents that we've had. I mean, completely. I feel like they left here different people for the better, having a broader understanding of, our family and our life and you, and just approaching, I feel like that took our relationship with them even further to another level, you know?
I feel like you could apply the stages of grief to this whole situation of acknowledging racism and systemic racism and how we go about fixing the problem. Because what is it like? It's denial, and then anger, and depression, and acceptance, and what I don't know what all the other stages are, but it feels very much like that could apply to this whole situation where a lot of people are now breaking out of that. There's still a lot of people in that angry phase, still a lot of people in the denial phase. But there's a growing contingency of people
that are in this
they're leaving they've acknowledged it, they've turned and they've faced it, and they've recognized that there's actually a real problem, and they've recognized that they're starting to recognize that they've been part of the problem, if not explicitly, by being passive or being too lazy to engage, or not feeling like they have a place. Because that's another part of the whole conversation is people saying, well, I just don't know what to do. What can I do? I'm just one person and I'm white. What can I do to help fix, XYZ problem? It doesn't feel like it's my fight. Well, every soldier needs allies,
Yeah. Veronica, I think that's one of the things that really struck me is that here we are, when I watched 13th, here we are in the United States of America, the land of the free, and we have a class system. As you're watching that, you're like, oh my gosh, we completely have,
I've always said that racism in and of itself, I don't think has ever been the end game. That's not the end all be all. Instead, racism is a tool. It's a cudgel that's used as a weapon to weaponize against you and me, to keep us squabbling with each other so that we don't organize. And it's like the story in the Bible about the Tower of Babel, right? The Tower of Babel was this sort of epicenter of learning and knowledge and growth and potential and just action and building. And then God looked down and he said, man, if we let them continue how they're going, there's no limit to what they could achieve. We better like break this up before it gets out of hand. And so what did they say? Confounded their language and scattered them across the globe so that they couldn't cooperate as well anymore. And I feel like that's kind of a situation that a tool like racism is used to do, is to keep us all kind of in our own camps and not cooperating with each other in a way that would upset the system of power that already exists. And that's a class issue. That's not a race issue, the bigger picture. But the racism also comes from the fact that we built this country's wealth upon the backs of free labor, upon slaves. And there was an inherent racist undertone to all of that naturally, right? And then as we moved out of slavery, we moved into Jim Crow, and we had all the systemic problems that are associated with that. But all those issues ripple up into today's society, and they still exist. Obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it right now. And so there's just a lot of components, and I think people try to look at, they say, oh, well, slavery was hundreds of years ago. You know, we've got the same opportunities now. Like, there is no such thing as systemic racism. There is no such thing as like oppression against a certain race. We're all have the same opportunities and blah, blah, blah. Well, when you really look into it, that's one of those uncomfortable truths, that it's not true that we're all on equal footing. It's not true that we all have the same opportunities. It's not true that we're all running this race, but some people are starting on the starting line and some people are starting a mile behind the starting line. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's that privilege that we keep talking about, that we keep hearing about. But it's an invisible thing in a lot of ways. You know, it's something that people don't feel, like we talked about this before. People don't feel privileged when they're living paycheck to paycheck. And we don't need to rehash all that, but yeah. You know, these are issues that we have today because of the way that we started this country, the way that we founded this country, the way that we built our wealth. And then, you know, the racist policies that we put into place to keep people who were previously enslaved and their descendants from moving up from that station in life, you know. And it's all about class, and it's about the haves and the have-nots, and the people who have, they enjoy a sort of privileged position over all of us. That, you know, it's like when somebody's successful and they climb the ladder and then they cut the rope behind them so that nobody else can climb that same ladder. Racism is like the axe that's used to cut that rope. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense. It's one of the tools.
Yep. Okay, I'm hearing our little guy.
Volatile. For me, and honestly, I don't know about. I will choose my battles on this issue as a weak complicit. I mean, I don't think it's weakness. I think it's definitely, there's definitely something to be said for taking a sensible approach. And if you can affect change in other ways rather than just like, you know, shouting from the street corner with a sign around your neck. If you live in an environment where everyone around you is going to be hostile, if you express what's on your heart, or if you say anything, then, and it's not, and you can't easily move, you know, it might not be the wisest thing for you to just be as vocal as I could be living in Portland, you know what I mean? Where I'm surrounded by people who are allies, you know what I mean? It might not be safe for you to do such a thing. And if that's the case, then I would advise you against, you know, just being so overt with, you know, speaking out against your neighbors, you know. At the same time, I mean, if you feel like that's a risk that you are willing to endure, then by all means, get your megaphones out. But I think that you can affect change in different ways than just being you know, a squeaky wheel with a sign around your neck on the street corner, you know, that's going to paint a target on your back, you know. Deborah says, when I was in 6th grade, I was a part of the integration busing. A group of us were sent to another school, Deborah. And a group from that school sent to ours. Both groups of students were treated terrible at the schools we were at and not helped at all by adult educators. I came out of that with the goal to make sure adults need to be held accountable on all sides and not tell it. Yeah, 1000%. I mean, for myself, growing up in a what I always call it an all-white school district, and having educators who, they weren't racists, like most of them weren't, you know, they were in a similar situation as what Veronica's in, where they felt like, okay, well, I've got my teaching position, I've got my tenure, I've got my career to think about, I've got, you know, I want to retire in 5 years. If I start defending this kid against, you know, these people who are oppressing him, he's the minority, you know, and if I say something, I'm putting my neck on the line, I'm putting my pension on the line, I'm putting my, you know, my future and my family's future on the line if I stick my neck out for this one kid. So why would I do that? Why would I step out of my comfort zone and put myself at risk like that when I don't know what this kid is going to go on to do? I could be defending some kid who might be a killer in the, you know, and I think that thought process of that sort of the draw of safety and security over justice is dangerous. I try to judge my actions, like my moral actions, sometimes when I'm not sure if the action that I'm going to take is more moral or less moral than another action. I try to think in terms of if everyone in the world did what I'm about to do right now, would the world be better or worse? So if it's like, oh, I've got my, you know, my soda bottle and I'm chugging it and I toss it in the woods across the street, like it's not like my one bottle is not going to necessarily make a difference out trash in the wilderness. But if everybody did that, if everyone just threw one bottle out into the woods, we'd be living in a trash heap. So I decided I'm not going to do that because I don't want to live in a trash heap. So sometimes you have to take a seemingly like innocuous position and take it to the extreme, take it ad absurdum, right? Get it to the most extreme, ridiculous extrapolation, like the logical end to whatever that position is, and then reel it back in and make your decision based on what the world would look like if everyone took that action, or if, you know what I mean? I say, you know what I mean a lot. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that until just now.
It's okay.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
I spent over 20 years in education being vocal on how we all interact with each other. Oh yeah, busing and integration is, yeah. I mean, and it's funny too, because like a lot of people right now, and this might be too political for you, but folks who are like voting for Joe Biden, it's funny because Biden and Trump are kind of like, they're kind of neck and neck right now. It could go either way at the general election. But the people, the majority of people who are voting for Biden are like holding their noses to vote for him. They just don't want Trump, you know. But Biden's position on busing and on redlining and all these things, not good positions. Like he was in the wrong virtually across the board. And so for somebody like me, who I personally would not like to see another 4 years of the current administration, but I also don't necessarily want to see a Joe Biden presidency because I don't think that much will get accomplished. It's real frustrating when you have that sort of, when the lesser of two evils is still evil. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
I don't know. Well, we'll save the politics for the YouTube. The YouTube's maybe tomorrow. I don't know. We do need better choices, Deborah. And unfortunately, the media our corporate media has been very complicit in pushing out alternative candidates that aren't represented in the two major parties. We have this duopoly that's like this false dichotomy of a system where both towers are passing, they pass the power back and forth every 4 years or every 8 years or whatever. They have similar goals when it comes to economics and it's that class divide.
Okay, our little guy's crying, so I'm going to jump over. But thanks everybody for hanging out and chatting with us. We can go on. But we love you all, and thank you for being here. And
make a wish. Is it real?
No.
She tried to blow them away and they didn't go.
Apparently not. But thank you for being here and being open. We appreciate all of you. We love you. Have a wonderful night.
Oh, careful.
Right.
You all wrapped up in the spaghetti cables. Sorry.
And our little guy's waiting at the door.
Oh gosh. So old Batless, so ever since we changed his bed over from being like a crib with 4 walls on it, took the 4th wall off. So it's his big boy bed now, his boy bed. So now when he wakes up, instead of just like screaming and crying from his crib, he can get up and open the door and come into our room or whatever in the middle of the night. But his door doesn't like close and latch all the way. Kind of like it gets jammed. So he doesn't have the strength to actually pull it from being wedged open. I need to take the door off. And I think if I just take it off and put it back on, it'll probably square up, but who knows? But so now his thing is he'll get up out of his bed and stand at his door. Mama did that. So cute. That guy. Running, there are ways we can do work without making ourselves target. People need to be on the front lines and behind the scenes. That's for sure. That is for sure, Lisa. And I mean, I would encourage all of you to try and find ways that you can, you can be in the fight. But quite frankly, like sometimes we do need to be willing to have a target on our backs. Sometimes we do need to be willing to put ourselves into like, again, those uncomfortable positions where the people that we work with, or the people that we go to school with, or the people who take care of our children, might not agree. But again, to stay complicit and to stay silent on the sidelines is to be complicit. It's like if you saw your friend getting beaten up on the street by a stranger, would you just stand there or would you try to do something about it? Some people would jump in and pull the guy off of him and get in the fight and risk getting a tooth knocked out. Other people might not feel that they can do that. And so instead they call 911 or they call other people around to come and mob this guy, get him off, but standing there, not saying it or doing anything, you're complicit in that abuse that's happening. And we're in a similar situation right now. That's completely that's directly analogous to the situation that we're in. So if you have friends and you consider yourself to be an ally, or non-racist or anti-racist, then you have a responsibility to point it out where you see it, because nothing's going to change if it's only the people if it's only the victims of atrocities that are pointing out those atrocities. Well, what the hell do you think is going to happen? Nothing. The atrocities are going to continue to be perpetuated until those voices are squashed out. So it takes allies, takes strong voices from within, but it also takes people who already have the privilege, the people who are already in positions of power, pointing out the injustices, and being allies, being effective allies, not just saying you're an ally. There's a difference between throwing the fist up and actually, calling your congressperson, or, calling your mayor, or talking to your police department and expressing your views on how they should be running their department, or how, changes that you would like to see in the environments that you occupy. If you're not willing to say something, then you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. what what Julia's aunt always says. So come to the table, come to the party, join the party. And, I think there's, like I said, that we've reached this point where we're at a precipice. And I think that, some of us have already gone over the edge and past the point of no return. Some of us are still in those beginning stages of grief, where we're in denial that this is even an issue. Some people are angry about it. Some people, they don't want to believe because it makes them uncomfortable, because it pushes them out of their circle of media or their circle of security. And we got to get past that. But the only way that those people who are in those stages that are stuck there are going to get out of those is the people who have made it beyond that, reaching back and giving them a hand up. And it might be painful to do so. You might be risking them slapping that hand away and losing a friend or losing a family member. But those are, to me, and it's easy for me to say because I'm part of that group that is on the receiving end of the injustice. It's easy for me to say, oh, go ahead and stick your neck out and, reach your hand down and risk it getting slapped away, or risk losing friends, risk losing family members by expressing your views or by, positioning yourself in a certain way. It's easy for me to say that, but it's harder for you to do those things if you are a part of that group that is, the part of the group that's doing the oppression. So if you're white or you're non-black, non-colored, you're not black or brown, you're white or whatever, or perceived as white even, because that's a thing. Consider the ways in which you can reach out to people in your community to see how you can be of assistance to them on a local level, because it's very easy for our voices to get lost in the crowd when we're, it's a little easier now for our voice to be heard because people are gathering and people are joining voices together to be and stomping in the streets to make damn sure we're heard. But sometimes the better approach on an individual level is to try to make changes in the place, like I said, in the place where you live with the people who surround you. So whether it's people at church who don't believe that racism exists, or they don't understand what white privilege is, or they, they're the kind of people that might drop the N-bomb, casually and not think about it. Those are the people that we've got to reach, I think, on an individual basis and really walk them through. Some of those people, a lot of people are going to need a lot of hand-holding through this process because it's scary. It's frightening to learn that you were wrong about something so consequential, and to have to ignore. It's like, what was I watching the other day that I was watching some, forgive my nerdiness, but I'm a total Trekkie. I love Star Trek. And there's an episode in Star Trek where a character named O'Brien discovers that he goes into, he's like totally this brilliant, very smart guy, very kind, but he gets, I think somehow he gets kidnapped and he's in some almost like a concentration camp on some alien planet, and he finds this one friend who's like his cellmate, and they develop this bond together, and but food is really scarce and they haven't eaten in a long time and all this kind of stuff. And then he finds that his friend, the one person that he thought he could trust, has been hoarding food away, and he kills the guy over it. And then and it wasn't until after he killed the guy that he looked and he saw that he had been actually stashing food for the both of them. So he discovered that he killed his friend for no good reason. And in a similar way, people who are overtly racist or who are holding on to those beliefs, those people who are flying their Confederate flags, those people who, are voting a particular way because they don't like black people, or because, even if it's not that overt racism, if it's the implicit stuff, not the explicit stuff, to bring a person to that realization that they've been killing their friend for no good reason, it's a tough reality to swallow. And for somebody who's been taught their whole life that things are a certain way, and now the world at large is telling them that, in fact, it's the opposite of what you thought was true, what you thought your reality was, that's a tough thing to have to figure out. And so those people are going to need a lot of guidance from people like all of you, and from people like us, and from people who are sort of a little bit more woke, as the kids are saying these days. You can't expect people to change overnight. You can't expect people to change. You can't expect people to have the intellectual curiosity to want to better themselves. And you can't expect people, you can insist that people not be lazy, especially this day and age when all it takes to learn something is a quick Google search, you know? And there's, to me, these days, there's no excuse for ignorance anymore, because we live in the information age, and the age of instant access to that information. It's not like you got to go to the next town over to the local library to check out a book to learn about racism. You can it's a few keystrokes away. So for those who you might have in your life who are, it's easy to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. But if that dog can't learn a new trick, they're gonna get lost. They're gonna get swallowed up and be on the wrong side of history. And that's not the kind of legacy that you want to leave. That's not the kind of legacy that I want to allow the people that I care about to leave for themselves and for their children. I don't want to be party to allowing the perpetuation, that rippling effect down through the next successive generations to exist if I can help it. And so that's why we're doing stuff like having this conversation right now, and while we'll continue to have these conversations in the future. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I have to say for now. Sorry, I'm just talking at you, but I appreciate all of you showing up and being present and being willing to jump into the fight. And you know, but like I said, not everyone is suited for every kind of fight, and but everybody can join this battle, because it's if one of us, you know, isn't free, then none of us are really free. And the harm done unto others is harm done unto yourself. And I truly believe that that's the case, and I feel like it's in our own best interest. It's in their interest and in our own best interest to educate those people who are whose views are backwards and antiquated and belong in the dustbin of history, as they say. So let's get out the brooms and start helping people to sweep out their old beliefs and relearn some old behaviors and get with it. Catch up. Hashtag catch up. All right, y'all. Well, we love you, and we will see you again very soon. I should remind you that we have MegaLink thing happening right now with some prizes that we can unlock. So it's a quick plug for that. I think the link to that MegaLink is in the description of this video, and also if you got the robot that went out a little bit earlier, a couple hours ago, links all through there. You can kind of review what the prize tiers and stuff like that are. But it's going on, I think, until Julia, she can't hear me. I think it's going until Sunday. So don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. So anyway, jump in, do that, have fun, splurge on yourself. We love you. And yeah, we'll talk to you again very, very soon. We'll probably see you guys tomorrow. Okay, love you, bye.